Good morning. I believe that health care is a basic human right and that everyone should be able to take their kids or their parents to see a doctor when they're sick. But sadly, right now, across our country, access to affordable health care is under attack. This is scary, especially for those with pre-existing conditions that could face insurers denying them coverage or kicking them off of their ability to secure health care at a time when they need it the most. There are approximately 1.8 million Kentuckians. Can we adjust the sound? Let's try that again. Bear with me. Testing 1, 2. Better? Okay. There are approximately 1.8 million Kentuckians with pre-existing conditions like asthma, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, cancer, and yes, even pregnancy is considered a pre-existing condition. We're talking about Kentuckians with these type of conditions who could be kicked off their health care coverage if the Affordable Care Act is overturned. I know the anxiety facing these families because I am one of them. 3 out of 4 members of my family have a pre-existing condition, and I'm one of them. And we must act now to protect every family, and that's why I'm supporting the passage of House Bill 21. I'm proud to stand in support of this measure, along with its 38 co-sponsors, many of whom are here today. Insurers should not have the option to deny our children, parents, grandparents, friends, co-workers, and neighbors the coverage that they need. This is wrong. Our families deserve better, and it is an issue of life and death. I told a story during the campaign that was more than a story. It was about a woman that I went to church with. That on her last night on earth, which happened to be our Christmas Eve service, stopped me on the way out and talked about how she would, without the Affordable Care Act, without coverage for pre-existing conditions, have not been alive the last 3 years that she got to celebrate with her family. And that night, the last one that she had on earth, she wanted me to know the importance of that coverage for pre-existing conditions that gave her more time with her husband and with her children. This is a real urgency that we take action this session. Just yesterday, the United States Supreme Court announced they would hear a case, one that I know well, Texas versus the United States. It's a case that I've been a part of since being Attorney General, and with a coalition of other Attorneys General, I am still fighting to overturn a ruling from a federal district court in Texas, which would decimate the health care provided to millions upon millions of our fellow citizens. We cannot stop fighting because of those opposing the ACA protections. Should they win in this court, expanded Medicaid would be eliminated. If you want to know what that looks like, look at every state that hasn't passed it and the widespread closures of rural hospitals. It would be harder for children to stay on their parents' health care coverage. Those coming out of school or getting a trade, just getting up on their feet would no longer be able to stay on their parents' coverage. Guaranteed pregnancy coverage could be eliminated. Substance use disorder treatment would no longer be a required benefit. Children would lose access to no-cost immunizations and well-child visits, something we're all thinking about, especially right now. And older Kentuckians and women could be charged vastly more than younger Kentuckians and men. And if this case is not overturned, that ruling in Texas, those with pre-existing conditions would absolutely be at risk. But if we pass House Bill 21, Kentuckians will no longer have to worry. They will know that in their state, we support their health care, that we are looking out after them, and no matter what the Supreme Court does, that those with pre-existing conditions would be protected in this Commonwealth. In Kentucky, we can make sure our families get the health care they deserve. We know when Kentuckians get access to care, they get healthier. Since expanded Medicaid, we have seen increased cancer screenings, more preventative dental services, and substance use treatment services. I believe that it has been one of the most important decisions that we have made in Kentucky, and our people are so much healthier for it. In my proposed budget, I included money for expanded Medicaid, which is critical throughout Kentucky, especially in our rural areas, and I also included funding to enroll every eligible adult in Medicaid and every eligible child in K-CHIP. It is our responsibility to sign up every Kentuckian for some form of health care coverage. In my administration, we talk a lot about what it means to be on Team Kentucky, and we stand here united to truly stand up for all of our families. And let me say, this bill is pretty simple. If you truly support mandatory coverage for pre-existing conditions, then you support this bill. There are no other add-ons in it. There are no reasons to be against it. You are either for mandatory coverage of pre-existing conditions or you are against it. I think it is time for all of our legislators to step up, to pass this bill, and to protect our people. Kentuckians need access to health care. We can ensure a child with diabetes is never turned away. A senior with cancer is never turned down. A new mom is not left with coverage. We can make sure our families come before our insurance companies' profits. Our Kentucky families are counting on us to work together to move this state forward. We're next going to hear from the bill sponsor, Representative Patti Mentor. We will then hear from Amanda Perkins in Lexington, who is an attorney who's going to talk a little bit about her story. And then we're finally going to hear from Lynn Ward, a self-employed contractor who's going to talk about their story. Representative Mentor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Governor Beshear, for your strong support of House Bill 21, which will protect affordable health care coverage for the people of Kentucky. I'm here today as a state representative. I'm here today as a mom. I'm here today as a Kentuckian who wants to see every one of us have the health care that we need to survive and to thrive. And I'm here because this is the right thing to do. Everyone in my immediate family has a pre-existing health care condition. My son Alex has lived with type 1 diabetes since he was 19 months old. The protections that all Americans have through the Affordable Care Act prevent insurance companies from denying them coverage because of pre-existing conditions. Folks, these protections work. These protections are incredibly popular. They're popular amongst Democrats, amongst Republicans, amongst independents. Everybody wants to make sure they're not going to be thrown off of their insurance because something happens to them that requires insurance. These protections safeguard health coverage for millions of people. We're here today because protections for these pre-existing conditions are under attack. Congress came within just a few votes of repealing the Affordable Care Act in 2017. And special interest lawsuits have attempted to undermine federal health care reform again and again. And as Governor Beshear told you, the Affordable Care Act could be struck down entirely when it goes to the Supreme Court this year. This is no joke. And this could happen before this body gavels back into session in January of 2021. With the health security of all Americans in jeopardy, we have to take action here at home. That means passing House Bill 21 and ensuring that no matter what happens at the federal level, no Kentuckian, not my son Alex, not the people in Governor Beshear's family who live with pre-existing conditions, that no one in our Commonwealth will ever see their coverage dropped because they have a pre-existing condition. This is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for Kentucky's economy, for Kentucky's families, and for every Kentuckian who lives with a pre-existing condition like diabetes, like asthma, like cancer. As the governor has said many times, health care is a basic human right, and no insurance company should ever be able to add a few dollars to their bottom line by tearing coverage away from the people who need it most. And no one should be faced with medical bankruptcy because we didn't do the right thing in this session to help them. Let's face it, elected officials have to make tough choices all the time, but this should not be one of them. This is an easy choice. Let's give House Bill 21 a committee hearing. Let's pass this bill this session to protect health care for every Kentuckian. Thank you, and it is my pleasure now to introduce to you Emily Beauregard, who is the Executive Director of Kentucky Voices for Health, who will introduce other Kentuckians who live with pre-existing conditions.
Good morning. I want to thank Governor Beshear and Representative Minter for inviting me to be here today to speak about the need for state legislation to protect Kentuckians with pre-existing conditions. As the director of Kentucky Voices for Health, I'm here as a consumer advocate on behalf of the nearly 1.8 million Kentuckians with pre-existing conditions who fear that they can be denied a future where they could be denied coverage again, and every woman who doesn't want to go back to the days of being denied care or charged more by insurers simply for being a woman. These are our friends, our family members, neighbors, and coworkers, and their stories are far too common. I recently spoke with a woman named Sue from Paint Lick, Kentucky, who was laid off from her job in 2010 and was looking for work. Sue had a form of leukemia, a blood cancer known as CLL, and the only insurance company that would insure her set her premium at $1,200 a month. The real kicker was that had she even been able to scrape together the money every month to pay that outlandish premium, the insurer wouldn't have covered anything related to her cancer for 5 years. In the end, Sue went without health insurance until she finally qualified for Medicare. She considers herself lucky to have been in remission during those years, but that doesn't change the fact that she lived with the anxiety that something could go wrong at any moment. Sue's story would have been very different had she lost her job after the ACA went into effect, because the federal law now forbids insurance companies from denying people with pre-existing conditions from charging them more or capping their benefits. When you consider that life itself is a pre-existing condition, it makes no sense to have a health insurance system designed to turn its back on you when you really need it. That's why the ACA has become such a critical part of Kentucky's healthcare safety net. It catches people when something goes wrong. The fact is that every single Kentuckian has benefited from the ACA in one way or another, whether they know it or not. The list is long: Medicaid expansion, marketplace subsidies that make coverage more affordable, free preventive services, staying on your parents' coverage until you turn 26, the guarantee of essential health benefits, parity for mental health and substance use treatment, the freedom to become an entrepreneur or a small business owner, and the financial security of knowing that a pre-existing condition won't lead to bankruptcy. As controversial as the ACA has become, I sometimes worry that Kentuckians may be taking these new protections for granted. We should not forget the alternative. Before 2014, the cost of being uninsured often dictated our career choices and crippled too many of us with the fears of denied care, medical debt, and bankruptcy. The ACA has been the law of the land for a decade now, and even though its protections have been in place for the last 6 years, repeated threats to the ACA mean that we continue to hear from people who live in with the fear of being denied coverage again. 2 of them are here to share their stories with you today. It would be unconscionable to go back to the days when Kentuckians were dying from treatable diseases and suffering from preventable disabilities because they couldn't get the care they needed. We cannot let that happen. which is why I'm so grateful to be standing here today in support of House Bill 21. Regardless of what happens at the federal level, every Kentuckian deserves access to affordable health care without discrimination. Representative Minter, on behalf of the 1.9 million Kentuckians who currently have a pre-existing condition, and the rest of us who would have one at some point in our lives, I want to thank you for sponsoring this bill, which upholds the protections of the ACA and honors the dignity of every Kentuckian by ensuring that none of us will go without coverage. Thank you. And now I am honored to introduce two people who will share their own stories having pre-existing conditions. The first person that I'd like to invite up is Len Ward from Louisville.
In 1982, I was born with a rare heart condition that had a very, let's face it, no chance of survival. It's called an endocardial cushion defect with a hypoplastic left ventricle. At the time that I was born, they barely found it. I could have gone home, I could have died, and then wouldn't be here. A doctor spotted it, didn't really have any way to treat it, so they just did a couple of surgeries that were kind of a prophylactic measure to fix it to the point where hopefully science could step up at some point and fix it. By the time that I was 8 years old, I had my second surgery, which has essentially fixed the problem, and I stand before you today without a whole lot of issues. Don't really have any limitations, not really on any medication anymore. It's honestly a miracle that I'm here. And despite all of that, despite my good health, despite my good fortune, the stigma of having a pre-existing condition looms hard over me every day of my life and has for a very long time. My mother, who's in the audience here, has been the biggest fighter for me in all of my life. She wanted to be a child psychologist when she was getting ready to have me, and then we had the issues that came up. So she had to keep her job working at an insurance company to keep the benefits that they had. Otherwise, we would be in a lot of debt or not able to pay for it, and I would not be here. After all of those years, I decided I wanted to become a writer. I do very well with my work. I worked freelance for about 7 years. And then about the time before the ACA was passed, the mandate for not being able to be covered by your parents' insurance was 21. So by the time I was 21, being a freelancer, I was kicked off of my parents' insurance, and unless I had like a straight job or something like that that came with benefits, I was not covered. So for the entirety of about 7 years, I had no coverage whatsoever. In the time of that, I got to working with a lot of kids with other heart conditions like mine. Got a lot of sympathy for it, got to see a lot of other stories that have gone far worse than my own, and I feel much luckier and a bit of survivor's guilt from it. But with all of that happening, I started doing a comic book series called The Zipper Club, based on a group of kids that are growing up with similar issues to mine. And I've had a lot of success, a lot of seeing a lot of stories from a lot of different kids who are living those types of lives. And the 7 years that I've been off of insurance and all of that, I was very lucky, didn't have any real issues come up, didn't really have to go to the doctor. Went a little too long without getting my teeth checked for a while, and that didn't work out so well for me when I finally did get insurance and had to go to the dentist and get that paid for. But finally having the ACA pass changed my life, brought the fear off of me, kept everything much lighter. And I thought it would be the end of it. For a long time, I figured, maybe this is the change. And then things changed a couple of years ago, and you start hearing rumblings of people trying to take it away, trying to tear it down. And I know it's not a perfect plan, but the fact that anybody can be covered, the fact that anybody is about a day away from, one bad day away from having a pre-existing condition, it's passing HB 21 would be not just the good thing to do, the responsible thing to do, it's the humane thing to do, and it's the life-saving thing to do. So step up, get it done.
Right on.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Len. Now I'd like to welcome Amanda Perkins from Lexington.
Thank you, Governor Beshear and Representative Minter, for your hard work and all of the other sponsors. As Emily said, my name is Amanda Perkins. I'm an attorney and I live in Lexington. In the fall of 2011, when I was 24 and in my last year of law school, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. If you don't know about type 1 diabetes, it takes daily intensive maintenance and very expensive treatment, such as insulin, to manage it. And also, thank you, Representative Minter, for your work on the insulin price bill. Luckily, at the time that I was diagnosed, the ACA was already in the implementation process, and I was able to stay on my mother's plan until I was 26. Naively, I didn't think much more about health insurance until I approached my 26th birthday. At that time, my small employer did not offer group health insurance. I called around to the big insurance companies, and they all said the same thing. Your diabetes makes you uninsurable, or we will sell you an insurance policy, but we will not cover any of your diabetes care. They told me to check into my state's high-risk pool. And at that time, Kentucky had just closed their high-risk pool, Kentucky Access. The problem with the high-risk pool is that it was totally unaffordable. The premium for me would have been $700 a month, and I would have had to pay a full year's premium before they would even pay for my diabetes treatment. In a normal calendar year, my medical costs without insurance is around $22,000. So the total cost for me in 1 year would have been almost $31,000. As a recent law school graduate coming into a post-recession job market, I was terrified. There was no way that I could afford to pay for my life-sustaining medications without insurance, yet no one would sell me any. I honestly could not believe that I lived in a country where I couldn't buy insurance. Fortunately, I was able to COBRA off of my mother's group plan until the ACA coverage for pre-existing conditions went into effect. While this was in no way affordable, as I was still paying around $650 a month in premiums alone, it was my only option. The financial strain was enormous, and I had to move back home with my parents in order just to pay for my medical care. The ACA and its protections for pre-existing conditions almost certainly saved my life. Even though my care is by no means cheap, I'm just thankful now to have the opportunity to afford it. However, the uncertainty of the law's fate brings about a lot of fear and anxiety. Every election year, I'm on pins and needles as to the fate of the ACA. In December 2018, I sobbed when I read the ruling in Texas versus the United States, holding that the ACA was unconstitutional, and again when I read the Fifth Circuit Court's opinion affirming it. And thank you, Governor Beshear, for opposing that. And if the Supreme Court sides with the Trump administration and holds the ACA unconstitutional, I am terrified of what it will mean for my life and the lives of 1.8 million Kentuckians who are living with pre-existing conditions. We are told by our government that everyone with pre-existing conditions will be covered, but the loss of protections in the ACA make that untrue. That is why I'm so thankful for Governor Beshear, Representative Minter, and all the other sponsors for House Bill 21. The protection it provides and the peace of mind it brings is something we all should support. Even if you aren't living with a pre-existing condition right now, without the protections this bill provides, the odds are high that there will come a day when you have health care needs and find yourself either being denied like I was or forced to pay exorbitant health care costs. I never want another Kentuckian or any other human to stay up at night wondering how they will pay for their medical care and what they will have to sacrifice to obtain it. Thank you.
I want to thank both of you for being willing to share not your stories, your reality. It shows you how real and how important this is, how critical it is that we have these protections in Kentucky law. Now, neither of these individuals should have to stay up at night worried about whether or not we will have mandatory coverage for pre-existing conditions any longer. We hear folks from all different sides of the aisle saying we support coverage for pre-existing conditions. Now's the time to prove it. It's a very simple bill, and it very clearly would mandate coverage for pre-existing conditions. I agree, let's get it done, and we should get it passed. We're happy to take questions on this, and then after I'll take questions on other issues.
Governor, there's been some former governors who signed executive orders to deal with health insurance. Did you do that?
Well, we believe a mandate passed by the General Assembly is certainly the preferable route to ensuring that we have coverage for every single Kentuckian with a pre-existing condition. Other states have done this. It shouldn't increase costs at all because it's already required by federal law. All it would do is maintain the status quo and then make sure that we have the right law protecting our people in place if the ACA is overturned.
Has the chair of the committee said why this bill isn't getting a committee hearing?
No, he has not. And this is a bipartisan bill. We do have Republican co-sponsors on this bill. And again, it's time for Representative Bart Rowland, who chairs Banking and Insurance, to go ahead and give this a committee hearing. And there's no doubt in my mind that once we have the committee hearing, it'll be very successful and it will pass on the floor. And there are currently similar bills that have passed by overwhelming margins in at least one house in West Virginia and Illinois, just in this session. And as the governor noted, this has happened in other places around the country. It has bipartisan support, and this is absolutely necessary. That case is going to be decided before we gavel back in. Plan years begin on January 1st, 2021. It's unconscionable to think that we would even consider exposing all of the people in the Commonwealth, the 1 in 2 people in this Commonwealth who need this coverage, and they're counting on their lawmakers to make sure that they have the health care that we all deserve.
Does the bill also deal with how much an insurance company can charge for a premium for a person with pre-existing conditions?
The bill would, those are called premiums, and it does not allow for premiums. It makes sure, as Ms. Beauregard pointed out, that pregnancy and just the sheer act of being a woman is going to be protected, because that is something that many people discovered when they become pregnant or when they have many issues that are unique to women, that these were things that had premiums piled on top of it, surcharge piled on top of it. So this would cover all of this. And again, why do we buy insurance? Nobody wants to make a claim, right? We'd all like to be healthy. We'd like to not wreck our cars. We don't want anything to happen to our homes. But we buy insurance as a safeguard, that when the unthinkable happens, it kicks in. That's what this bill does. This is a safeguard. If the unthinkable happens and the Supreme Court, and it could very easily happen, if the Supreme Court strikes down the ACA in part or in whole, then KRS kicks in, and this General Assembly has a responsibility to make sure, just like we buy insurance for our cars and our homes and for health care, it's our responsibility to make sure that we've got Kentuckians covered.
Governor, jumping on
All I'd add is that our health care system doesn't work for families that don't have coverage. When they go to see a doctor, or worse, have to go to the emergency room, need a test, the charges for it are exorbitant. They aren't tied at all to the actual cost of the service at that point. They're created by this system where the insurers are negotiating with those providers. And so when you are not in the system, if you can be kicked off of your coverage, then not only if you have a pre-existing condition do you have a lot of needs, but the healthcare system doesn't work for you. And just think about all of our friends with diabetes. Think about those that are experiencing pregnancy or have in the past, and I still cannot figure out how that is a pre-existing condition. This is just the right thing to do, and it's the only way our healthcare system will work in Kentucky if the ACA is struck down.
Let me ask a question. I know you prefer this method, the bill. If it doesn't move forward, are you prepared at some point to issue these certificates?
Well, I believe health care is a basic human right, and I will look to any means I have to protect Kentuckians and ensure that they can get accessible, affordable health care. It's one of the reasons as Attorney General that I went after so many pharmaceutical companies and how they are skyrocketing our costs. My job is to protect our families, and as I talk about the where, that we focus on in our office, the H is for health care, and we're focused on it every day.
Governor, you indicated you're one of the 1.8 million Kentuckians?
I am.
Do you feel comfortable saying?
Sure. I have a very low level of asthma. I was diagnosed as an adult at 30, have never actually had any real issues, at least before the campaign, was pretty healthy. But even at 42 with almost no complications because of that diagnosis, even though I could survive without medication, would not be able to, or potentially would not be able to secure coverage. I figure if Danny Bentley can hold up the insulin, I can talk about that.
That's right.
Al, thank you all so much. We appreciate you. I'm going to answer questions about everything else. All right.
Thank you, Governor.